Hey, Mr. Lunardi, how are you?
Sam, good morning.
So we got an audience full of students here, and then some have logged in to their iPads to listen to. So we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
No, my pleasure.
So we've had a
Haven't
few
had
guests.
my coffee yet. Haven't had the coffee.
Okay. All right. Well, we've had a few guests and kind of how they started off, and I thought it went pretty well. If you're willing to do this, if maybe you take 5 or 10 minutes and just kind of explain your career and what you do and how you got there, and then maybe the kids can ask some questions after that, if that works.
Sure, and we're talking like 7th and 8th graders mostly.
No, we're got like 10th through 12th graders.
Oh, okay. Okay, my bad.
Yeah, no problem.
For some reason, it was in my head that you were a middle school.
No. Parkersburg High School. So,
all right.
Our school is known as the School of Champions. We've won over 140 state titles in West Virginia. So,
wow.
So they love sports. Yeah.
All right. So, who's the greatest to ever emerge from Parkersburg?
Well, Nick Swisher, who played for the Yankees, he's a Parkersburg grad. And then if we're going way back, there's a guy named Greasy Neal who's in the Football Hall of Fame. So he's a PHS guy too.
Was I believe the quarterback or the head coach of the 48 and 49 NFL champion Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yep.
We don't have a lot of champions in Philly, so we know these things. But sure.
Yeah, right.
Ready to go.
Yeah. Okay, well, take it away, and then we'll ask some questions afterward.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I realize it is early. It's early for me, too. I was up watching the last game of the second round of the NCAA tournament last night. Ended around midnight in the East with a blowout win over Kansas by Southern Cal that maybe surprised some people. Certainly the magnitude of the win, if not the outcome itself. And it completed a 4-day period of NCAA championship basketball, unlike that we've ever seen for the mathematically inclined. Of the 16 teams now remaining out of the original 68, it is the most upset-filled Sweet 16 we've ever encountered, at least since they started seeding teams back around 1981. And by when you look on TV and Illinois is playing Drexel and it says 1 versus 16, the bigger the number, the worse the team in the eyes of the committee that puts it together. So we've got a lot of those big numbers still playing. And essentially, that's a good transition into what I do, because many of you are probably thinking, well, what the heck is bracketology? And by extension, what is a bracketologist? And the simple answer is my job isn't to predict who's going to win the games, but who is going to be on that piece of paper the Sunday night before the tournament starts when the field is announced by the NCAA. So raise your hand if you've ever filled out a bracket.
You can't hear me because I muted myself. Pretty much, they all are raising their hand because we did a competition in class. So
okay.
Yeah.
So for purposes only for academic rigor or amusement, we would pursue a bracket contest, but the essence of it is everyone does it. Whether it's in school or an office contest in the household. I mean, I've got one going with my wife and daughters and dog, and I'm at least beating the dog this year. So I'm feeling, going to put my chest out and brag a little bit about that. I have in the past, lost to a Cocker Spaniel. So that can be a little embarrassing. But my job is to say in advance what teams are going to be in that bracket. And if I'm really doing it well, what their seed is going to be. And even in a normal year where the teams are shipped all over the country to play, what region they're going to be in. And the reason why people are captivated by what I do, in addition to the bracket itself, is because college sports, unlike professional sports, is way more, what's the word here? Inclusive, if you will. Pro sports is limited primarily to the big cities, right? Because the cities have the populations to support financially professional sports teams and the huge salaries that they pay, right? I mean, I don't know who you guys all root for in the NFL, but I'm just going to say maybe it's the Steelers. I don't know if it is or it isn't, but if they move the Pittsburgh Steelers to Parkersburg, they probably wouldn't sell enough tickets or sponsorships or luxury suites to sustain the team, right? So we have roughly, maybe 40 or 50 big cities that have pro sports across football, baseball, basketball, hockey, whatever. College sports is way different because we're all from somewhere, or we all went to school somewhere, and every area of the country has a team. Whether it's WVU or Marshall or whomever, and that goes all across America. So it's much more inclusive. So if you're up watching, I don't know, Oregon State play Oklahoma State after midnight on a Sunday, as, maybe I was, and probably not the only one, like, you may go, well, I don't care about Oregon State. Well, the people in Oregon do. And that's why there's this kind of crazed interest in the tournament. And since the committee who makes the selections doesn't do it publicly until the actual release of the bracket, the speculation over who might make it is enormous. And in a way, I'm speaking to the fans, not on behalf of the committee, but in place of the committee. And since, a little humble brag here, I guess, since over the years we've been fairly accurate, people take it as credible if I go on TV and say, well, Duke isn't going to make it because blah, blah, blah. But Drake is going to make it, even though everyone and their uncle has heard of Duke, and almost no one could find Drake, even if I gave him a map and a big red arrow. So that's what I do. And it has become gone from a hobby to a profession. I do a lot of math. There's a lot of data involved. I crunch a lot of numbers, but I also watch a lot of games, or at least keep track of a lot of games, because I need to know at any given point in time, who's trending up and maybe who's not, because that is what the committee members are also doing all season long. So I hope, Sam, that's kind of a good jumping off point, and we can take it from there.
So my students wrote a bunch of questions, and then some probably will ask you themselves here in a second. But when did you start predicting the bracket, and kind of how did that come to be?
Well, my older brothers tell me that I was playing with like a little Final Four bracket in a notebook in like 1971 with just like 4 or 8 teams on it. Now, I don't really remember that because, I was 10. But I do remember in college, in the early 80s, I went to St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, and we went to the tournament a couple of times when I was in school. And in my junior year at St. Joe's, we got to play a number 1 seed. We were Loyola Chicago. In those days, excuse me, there were not 16 teams in each region. There were only 12, and the field was only 48 schools big. So the number ones, the 1, 2, 3, 4 in each group, they didn't have to play a first round game. They got a bye. So the 8, 9 had to play for the right to play the 1. And we, St. Joe's, we were in an 8, 9 game and won by 2 points, a close game, which you would think of an 8, 9 matchup, right? Generally. And the number 1 team in the country, undefeated, was DePaul University out of Chicago. And they had the leading scorer in the country, a guy by the name of Mark Aguirre, who's now in the Hall of Fame. And they had another NBA All-Star by the name of Terry Cummings in the middle, and they were really, really, really good. In fact, they were the number 1 seed in the tournament 2 years in a row, in 80 and in 81. And here we go into this game. Huge underdog. Nobody picking St. Joe's for good reason, right? And pulled off, at that time, 40 years ago, the upset of upsets, 49-48 on a last second layup that still gets replayed, right? Whenever we get to tournament time. And from that moment, Sam, like I just had a fascination with how did that all come together, right? Like what steps, what rules, what actions allowed that to happen? Like, why were we in that 8, 9 game paired with DePaul as opposed to, I don't know, we weren't even playing in our home region at that time. So that became a fascination, and I started studying the brackets. They were, beginning to see them. There was a data, there was a ranking system that they began to use to assist with selection and seeding in 1981 called the Rating Percentage Index, shorthand for the RPI, and that became the committee's kind of, go-to ranking system until about 3 years ago, when they threw it out and replaced it with something called the NET, the NCAA evaluation tool, which is far better, by the way. But no rating system is perfect, and that's why there's also humans in the room to try and decipher the differences between rankings as opposed to just putting them in straight down the list.
So this is kind of a personal question. I was wondering, do your projections change based on, I know each year the committee changes, I think like 2 individuals. Do your projections change based on that? Or is it pretty much they have the same mindset year after year?
I would say in maybe the last 4 or 5 years, it looks like their mindset is not changing so much, but it absolutely did shift, and sometimes significantly, in the 90s, and certainly through the earlier parts of the 2000s. And I don't know whether that's because of different people rotating into the committee, as it is. I always called it the flavor of the month. Like, one year maybe they're really interested in how a team plays at the end of the season, and another year it might be how they do it away from home, and another year it might be how they do against other top 50 opponents, and another year it might be their strength of schedule in non-league games. Like, you go back and read the transcript of the interviews with the committee head when the bracket comes out every year, and this is riveting stuff. You do kind of see a kind of a roller coaster ride, but with net, and even a little bit before that, I feel that their selections and seeding are much more even and even-handed, and I actually think easier to forecast than back in the day. Just don't tell anybody that, because I want to make a lot of money from being clairvoyant.
So a question that a lot of students had whenever they wrote questions out is, have you ever predicted a perfect bracket?
Well, I've gotten all the teams right on several occasions, once each when it was a 64-team field and a 65-team field. And in 2013 was the only time I got them all as a 68-team field. But most people's definition of a perfect bracket is getting all the games right. And no one's ever done that. No one's ever going to do that. And you say, well, why not? And I'll say, well, most of these games, the outcomes are kind of 50-50. Like, you have a few early round games that are really kind of one-sided, although not many this year. Most after that would be considered, kind of a coin flip. So, right, I'm going to grab a quarter right here. I got a quarter in my hand. And in order to get a perfect bracket would be the same as flipping this coin. There's 67 games and having it come up heads 67 times in a row. If anybody wants to try that today at school, go out at recess and flip a coin and see if they can get it to come up heads 67 times in a row. It's going to be a long wait, like forever. And, it's basically, it's like 1 in 9 quadrillion to 1 to get a perfect bracket. And that's like 200 times the number of people on planet Earth. So, I'm 60 years old. I'm thinking the odds of me seeing that in my lifetime are pretty slim.
All right, I'm going to open it up and see if any kids, either I'm going to have them come up to the screen and ask, or
Sure.
them tell me and I'll ask a question. Anybody got a question you want me to ask about this year's? Yeah, Mason, you want to ask yourself? Okay.
I've been reading about like 100 pages of a book, so it got me questioning, what made you think of making a book?
Thank you, Mason. I've been approached in the past about doing a book about, this whole bracketology thing. And the most honest answer I can give you is probably that I was lazy. Generally speaking, until the last year or two, when I'm retired from my quote unquote day job, when the tournament kind of gets rolling along toward the end. And when I'm done making my contributions to ESPN, I would have to go back to that job. And I would be a month behind in my work, and my workmates, would kind of be anxious to have me do my share. And so I never really got to the point of saying I'm going to commit the time to doing a book. But this past off season, number one, I didn't have that day job anymore. And number two, because of the pandemic, like pretty much everyone, I was sitting at home without as much to do. And a writer had been approaching me and kind of badgering me a little bit. And we finally agreed to do a book together, as long as it was more about, the phenomena of bracketology and how much people are into it and what part it contributes to the sport, than about Joe Lunardi's life story. Like nobody cares, where I went to grade school or what my what my CYO basketball playing career was like. They want to know about their teams and their schools and the NCAA tournament. And thankfully, we were able to focus mostly on that. And so far, so good. People seem to like it. So thank you for asking.
How long does it take you to prepare each bracket whenever you put it out, your projections kind of week to week?
It does get on a little bit of a roll, right? Like as the season builds. But I probably spend, and I have tracked it, until the very end, like the last couple 3 weeks, when it's, I'm on TV a ton, and the brackets are being updated more frequently, and they're using my information on the screen, on the bottom of the screen, and in-game kind of content. Like you'll be watching a game and they'll say, well, here's where Kansas stands and here's where Texas Tech stands, and this game means that according to Lunardi. And the basic parts of the season, I spend about an average of 20 hours a week just doing data entry and data analysis. In other words, I'm keeping by hand the exact same data categories that the committee members have in front of them. Right? Because it would seem like in anything, if you wanted to copy how somebody builds a skyscraper, right, having the exact plans in front of you would probably be the best place to start. So in my world, having the same information available to me, plus a lot more actually, because I'm a little nutty that way, is kind of the building block. So there's that. And as I'm entering and compiling and studying this data every day during the season from the prior day's results, right, I'm constantly ranking and re-ranking a potential field of 68 teams. So I would say 20 to 25 hours a week until maybe early February. And then when we're about a month out, it goes like this. And then by March, let's say March 1 to the middle of March, when the tournament starts, it's I don't want to say it's every waking moment, but it's pretty darn close. And then the actual putting of the teams into the bracket, using all of the NCAA principles, they're very, very detailed guidelines for how they do it. That a good bracket, like if thoroughly, takes about an hour to an hour and a half. And I have learned over the years, when I have to make my tweaks, I can do it in maybe 40 or 45 minutes if pressed and if there's enough carryover from the prior bracket that might be kind of out in circulation.
All right, I'm gonna see anybody got a question about this year's tournament, or you want me to ask one? All right, were you surprised by North Carolina getting upset? Although I don't know if it was an upset, it was 8-9 by Wisconsin. I've got a UNC fan here.
Yeah, I was certainly surprised by the, blowout nature of the game. I picked North Carolina to win the game. I thought that their height really was going to be too much for Wisconsin to overcome. But, talk about anomalies, kind of oddities statistically. Like Wisconsin is known to be a defensive-oriented, slow-paced, low-scoring team. And what'd they get, like 85 or 89 in that game? Like they blasted them. And, of course, they were going to come back to earth after that in the next round. And, they played against Baylor, a more typical Wisconsin game. Slow, close, sluggish. But, yeah, that game, the way it played out was really surprising. The outcome, I would have said 60-40 Carolina, to win that game, not 90-10. Also, Carolina had played a lot better at the end of the year than Wisconsin had. They just laid an egg that day. It happens a lot.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot of us are Mountaineer fans, so yeah. We're kind of depressed right now with the Syracuse game. But
and so let me ask you a question about that. So, like, I get the whole Syracuse thing, and they play a zone, like, and they're good at it, and it's tough for teams that are unfamiliar. But like, Huggins used to play Syracuse all the time, like in the Big East, and he does have 900 wins, and I was really surprised at how kind of unprepared they looked. Now, in fairness, I'll bet you could study this and look it up. On the second day of a tournament weekend, right? This, like the second round, the fourth round, etc. If you have an unfamiliar matchup, or you're playing a unique style, and you only have that one prep day, that can be a factor. And to be honest, I forgot about that when I picked WVU in that because I grew up in college basketball at a time when Syracuse was great during the regular season and then choked in the tournament, like pretty much all the time. And now the earth is flat, the moon is full, and it's reversed. So and like I've had 5 or 6 years of being wrong on Syracuse, like badly wrong on Syracuse. And I know he's wagging that finger at me and poking me in the eye, Boeheim, from a distance.
Yeah. This is kind of a twofold question that a student wrote. First of all, do you think the one and done rule is good or bad for college basketball? And then the second part is, if you could change one thing about college basketball, what would it be?
I don't know if the one and done rule is necessarily bad for college basketball. I think it's bad for the individual players who don't want to go to college. Like not everybody in any other profession has to go to college. Like, I love college, you might love college, and I love college basketball. But if, a year ago or 2 years ago, whenever it was, if Zion Williamson is good enough to go to the NBA, let him go. Right? Like, most kids that age are not physically developed enough, big and strong enough to compete against 25 and 30 and 35-year-old men. They're just not. Their bodies aren't ready yet. But like Kobe Bryant was, LeBron James was a linebacker when he was like 12 years old. And Zion Williamson clearly was, right? I mean, just look at him, right? So I think that those guys should be free to go play at whatever level their talent dictates. And I mean, I know why the rule is in place. It's largely because the NBA doesn't want to have to make decisions and draft guys who are 17 and 18 years old based on what their future potential might be and pay them like $3 million a year to sit on the bench and be glorified babysitters, right? But I guess my answer to that is if the NBA doesn't think the next kid in line to be chosen is good enough, then don't pick him, right? Pick a 20-year-old who's ready to play and let that guy sit on somebody else's bench. And the NCAA has to cooperate and say, okay, I put my name in, I didn't get picked, or I didn't get picked, where I wanted to, and then let him go to school or let him go to play in a minor league, right? Like I don't know why we restrict the choices. And it also makes a mockery of the academic side.
So kind of building off that, if you could change one thing about college basketball, what would it be?
Yeah, I would get rid of the committee and let me do it. It would save them a ton of money. I mean, they rent out an entire floor of the Marriott Marquis in New York City to house and feed and isolate the committee members for that week. I would probably do it for 2 pizzas and a 6-pack, and I would throw in the NIT no extra charge.
That sounds pretty good.
And you could do it with me, Sam.
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
You okay with that?
I used to teach math too, so this is right up my alley. So
there you go.
Yeah. I have a question about the committee. Whenever they're picking the 10 people, do all 10 fill out their own bracket and then they compare, or do the 10 people talk and then just make one bracket? I don't know if I'm asking that well enough.
I got it. You mean when they get to the actual, once the teams are picked and they put them in a bracket? Yeah. That at that point, they go from everybody having 1 screen each to vote and somebody in the corner tabulating. Then there's one big screen in the middle of the room, and there's an NCAA staff member that goes, okay, Gonzaga is number 1 overall. Where are we putting them? Well, they're obviously number 1 and in the West, right? Now, it's called the West this year, even though they're all in one place. And then, okay, number 2 overall is Baylor. Where do they go? So at that point, they can be anything except number 1 in the West because that spot is taken. So they make them number 1 in the South, and they just do that all the way down to 68. And they're all looking at it, trying to make the puzzle pieces fit with the help of NCAA staff that, are supposed to remind them of the bracketing rules, as well as, I don't have this. I could probably get somebody to build it for me, but I just do it in my head. Like if they try to type in a name, let's say to be the 6th in the Midwest, and that would give them a potential matchup against someone they've already played, it'll spit it out. It won't let it. So they get like a little error message. And that's to avoid, having to get criticized on national TV by knuckleheads like me who say you broke your own rule.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that I think the students would want to know, now that there's only 16 teams left, who would be your final four at this point, and who do you think will be the national champion now with just 16 teams left?
Well, back at the beginning of the tournament, heck, at the beginning of the season, my championship game was Gonzaga and Baylor. So I think I'll stick with that. In the fall, I picked Baylor. When the tournament started, I picked Gonzaga. I thought they would both be excellent this year. Gonzaga's been even better than really I thought they would be, and they're historically good. Baylor is also very good. But I think, if they played a best-of-7 series, Gonzaga would win in 6 or 7. Like they have more weapons. I also have Alabama coming out of the East, and they're still alive. Illinois obviously has been knocked out, so I would go with Houston in that Midwest region down in the bottom corner of the field.
Anybody got a question? We got about 10 minutes. Anybody got a yes? Okay. Kendall wants to know, why do you think so many 12s upset 5s each year?
Yeah. Well, we only had one this year, but the last time we had a tournament 2 years ago, 3 of them won. And I here's my theory anyway, and that is usually in a lot of cases, the 11s and the 12s are the last teams to get in. Because generally from 13, 14, 15, 16, those are all conference champions, but from the lower, weaker conferences, what we call the one bid leagues. A lot of the 11s and 12s are the last at-large teams from the bubble, right, that make it. And they generally pick the last few teams for who's winning right now, who's playing well right now. So a lot of times those spots are some of the hottest teams coming into the tournament, other than the teams at the very top. So they've been playing the equivalent of playoff games, like maybe for a month, just to get in, right? So, if you're UCLA and you're one of the last teams picked, as they were, they were in the last 4 in and played in that opening round because of it. Well, maybe they've been on edge, if you will, for a while, and that helps them in that spot. That's my theory. I don't know that it holds any weight. And the other part of it is, like, the true talent gap between a 5 and a 12 might only be like this. Like, for those who can see me, like, I'm holding my hands about 2 inches apart. Like, it's not a 1 versus 16 where it's like a foot. It just isn't. Like, on a 12, there are several guys who could play for the 5, right? They're good enough. On a 16, in many cases, there might not be one guy who would get in the game for the 1. So the gap is just way bigger. Like if the Super Bowl was a team that went 16-0 against 0-16, the 16-0 team would win pretty much every one, right? But if it was a 10-6 team against a 9-7 team, we go, this is maybe point spread might be a field goal, right? And that's what a 5-12 game is, a field goal, not a touchdown.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier 81 St. Joe's beating DePaul, but outside of that, do you have a favorite tournament moment that really rings true whenever you think of just great tournament moments?
Yeah, I was at center court with my wife and my brother and my nephew for the Christian Leitner shot That game was in Philly in 1992, and I was just a fan, sitting in the stands. But arguably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, tournament game ever. 104 to 103 in overtime. Duke the trying to repeat as champion. Leitner didn't miss a shot in the game. 10 for 10. Pretty extraordinary stuff.
All right. I know you have to go at 9, so I'm going to try to get 2.
Uh-oh.
That was our bell. But I'm going to try to get 2 questions in.
Okay.
First, do you ever get tired of watching basketball?
Yes. I think I'd be lying if I said no. Like there might be a Thursday night in February where my work requires me to wait until the end of the West Coast games, right? Thursday night is generally a Pac-12 night. And I live in the East Coast, and especially back in the day, when I had to get up for work, just like you have to get up for school, that result coming in at 1:30 in the morning, I might rather not, stay up. But by and large, even if I just have it on in the background and I'm doing other things, I can get away with that more earlier in the season. But I think when I start getting tired of it, like consistently, maybe that'll be a signal that it's time to do something else. But I'm not there yet. This is especially this year, as different as it was. I had a ball. I'm still having a ball.
Well, that kind of leads into this last question. So we've had a few other interviews, and so we finished with this. We have lots of juniors and seniors, some seniors going off to either work or college. Do you have any life advice, even outside of basketball, to give them as they
All right, you froze up for me a little bit, but I think I got it, Sam. Yeah, I would give the same advice that I gave my own children and still give my own children, which is whenever you can, follow your heart and the rest will take care of itself. If it was said, I think it was Mark Twain, if you do something that you love, you'll never work a day in your life. Now, that's a bit of an overstatement, right? You can love to teach and some mornings probably not want to get up. Right? I mean, it's human nature. But I have been blessed by this. And, to now turn a personal hobby and passion into professional success is, what we might all aspire to do. But I've been at it like 25 years. When I started bracketing, it wasn't like I was an instant sensation. Like people weren't paying attention. So you got to chip away. You got to start small and stay with it and do whatever is in front of you as best you can, because you never know where that might take you.
Well, this was great. We really, really appreciate it. And hopefully you and I can stay in touch, that maybe we can do this again whenever I have another class of students coming through. And just thank you so much.
My pleasure, Sam. Enjoy the rest of the tournament and stay safe out there.
All right. You too. Thank you.
You bet.
All right. See ya.
Thank you.